All right, welcome back to World History 2. We're going to start with Unit 10, which is World War One. So, since the Congress of Vienna and right after Napoleon, early 1800s, Napoleon's early 1800s, Europe is very affected by that war, and it's going to be very costly. We're eventually going to have the Crimean War before World War One. But for the most part, the Congress of Vienna is very successful in balancing everyone with that balance of power doctrine. World War One is going to affect the United States. It's going to affect parts of Africa and imperialized Asia, and it's going to affect Europe. So it is a very costly and big war. So, what are some reasons for World War One? And let's go back to Napoleon. Is nationalism. Nationalism is that ideology that my country's better than your country. I'm going to end up being a better army. We have a superior language. We have a superior religion. We have serious or a more successful ideology. So we are meant to exist, and we are better than you. And that's especially the case for neighbors. So maybe the British and the French, we've had the Hundred Years' War in class. We've had several instances. We have Catholics and Protestants, but that's kind of dying down. Neighbors like Germany and France, neighbors like Austria or even Germany eventually, and Russia in World War II. So there's going to be some tension and some nationalism. My country's better than yours, and that's going to lead to diplomatic failures. There's going to be an inability for these countries to come together. Another big thing that's happened is imperialism due to the Monroe Doctrine, we talked about in Unit 7, frees the Western world from imperialism. However, the United States doesn't back the rest of the world, and there's going to be a race for Africa. Countries colonize Africa. Let's look at a map of colonized Africa. You can see how involved it is. You're going to have the British, you're going to have the French, you're going to have the Italians, you're going to have the Portuguese, you're going to have some Dutch. You're going to have even the United States is a little bit involved with getting Liberia, but it's for independence. You have the Germans, and they're all going to fight for this. The only two that are free is Liberia, backed by the United States, based on liberty, and Ethiopia because it's a Christian kingdom and very hard to invade. So imperialism, they're fighting over resources. In the Congo, for example, Belgium, they have rubber for assembly lines or for tires, and that is something they really need from rubber trees. So it's going to create a lot of tension for resources. Another thing with the competition over colonies is militarism. Militarism is the buildup of your army. So the Germans might expand their army to 150,000, while the French might move theirs to 200,000, and the British move theirs to 250. The Russians move theirs to 300,000. It's a race who can make the best army because that's nationalism. My army's better than yours. It also creates innovations in army and military. World War One is where we see the biggest jump in weapons. We go from single shot rifles to bolt actions to machine guns to artillery, we get tanks, we get planes, we get bombs, we get mortars. Stuff that in 5 years we get gas, we get all sorts of new technology and innovations that comes as a result of World War One because they after industrialization or the Industrial Revolution, we look for efficiency. We had those cottage industries. I can make one blanket a month. Well, we can make 500 blankets now. They also try to make war and the art of killing more efficient. So it's going to be harder for war to be easy. It's not going to be successful, and it's going to be more of a challenge. But it's going to be easier to kill people, and it's easier on people mentally because they don't have to think about it. Okay, so war is going to change very much, and that's responsible for militarism. Another thing that's going to happen, and the immediate issue is going to be secret alliances. So that's another thing that's going to end with the League of Nations. We're going to have Russia that's aligned with Serbia. We're going to have Germany aligned with Austria. The French and the British and the Russians are going to be the Triple Entente. So if you want to look at a map, a Triple Entente. The Triple Entente consists of France, United Kingdom, and Russia. They all had the all grandmothers would have been Queen Victoria from England. And the Triple Alliance is going to be Italy, which will switch sides, Germany, and Austria-Hungary. So we've got to talk about how these things happen. The immediate result that creates this alliance system to be a problem is going to be the assassination of Austria's Archduke Ferdinand, which is in Serbia, and Austria takes it over for themselves. And it's not going to end well because of there's an assassination. Archduke Franz Ferdinand is going to be the prince that was going to be the next king. He's assassinated. Austria is going to start to put military into Serbia. Serbia asks Russia for help. Russia declares war on Austria. Austria declares war on Russia. Germany declares war on Russia. France declares war on Germany. Britain jumps in, and all these are instantly involved in a world war. So for the time the United States is not involved, the thing that brings the United States involved into World War I is going to be about 1917. We're going to have the sinking of the Lusitania. It was a passenger ship that had American civilians, but it also was being sent. It was, the United States is isolated. But we are sending weapons to the German side. We're sending weapons to the British side. The Germans are using unrestricted submarine warfare, and they're trying to blow up these ships. And the United States is selling to both sides. We have these weapons hidden in the bottom. Over 100 civilians are going to die. The Lusitania actually looks just like the Titanic. The Lusitania is just like the Titanic. It's going to be sunk, and that's going to kill 100 and some civilians. The other thing that gets the United States involved in the war later on is going to be the Zimmermann telegram. The Russians get a hold of the Germans get a hold of the Mexicans, and they say that you can get your old territory back from the Mexican-American War, which consists of California, it consists of New Mexico, Arizona, parts of Texas. If you join and start a front in the United States, even though the United States wasn't involved, that's going to be the final nail in the coffin. And our president at the time is going to be Woodrow Wilson. So Woodrow Wilson, this is him. He's our only president with a PhD. How you remember it is his initials are WW. He's our first president with those initials. So who was president during WW1? Well, that's Woodrow Wilson, our first president of the United States. Okay. On the German side, the leader that you need to know is Kaiser Wilhelm. That just translates to king in German. And it's Kaiser Wilhelm II, very nationalistic, and he always wants to look very proper. Always hides his arm because in childbirth his arm was mangled as he was pulled from the womb. So very sad situation there. And he does live to be an old man. United States ends joining the war right after the Russians leave. We'll talk about that. The United States brings fresh soldiers. We can innovate, we can mobilize, we can industrialize, and that's what's really going to turn the tide of the war. So it's going to be the British, the French, and the U.S. as Russia leaves. So let's talk about Russia. Russia has to leave because of eternal problems. So the eternal problems is going to be a revolution. We talked about Karl Marx and his Communist Manifesto last unit. Well, communism is going to become a reality in Russia because they want to get rid of Tsar Nicholas II. They do not trust Tsar Nicholas II. He's not a good monarch. He's an absolute one. There's still a serfdom or a peasantry class in Russia that doesn't really own land. They're not landowners. The peasants don't have land. They don't have food. There's a lot of starving going on. Russia's economy is behind Europe at least by 50, 60 years. So they do not look the same. The big thing that happens is the Russo-Japanese War. The Russo-Japanese War is going to be the first instance of an Asian power defeating a European power. And it's going to look bad on them, especially with nationalism. So my country's better than your country is a big philosophy among the peasants or the working class or the soldiers. And when you realize that the Japanese defeat a European army, and there's a lot of racism and superiority complex. They think that it's not going to be a possibility, but the Japanese are absolutely going to decimate them Navy-wise, and that's partly because of the United States showing the Japanese, here's how you have a great Navy, and they are going to be able to absolutely dominate thanks to American industry. And so Russia's going to lead the war because of that. The landless peasants are going to be doing uprisings, peasant uprisings, where they get pitchforks and torches and go and attack officials. The leader is Tsar Nicholas II, which just translates to king. Tsar Nicholas. You can see it spelled two different ways, T-S-A-R or C-Z-A-R. And his whole family is going to be killed during the Russian Revolution. Vladimir Lenin's going to be the guy that kills them. There's also a high peasant class. There's a lot of defeats in World War I. The Germans are absolutely whooping them, taking a lot of land, and high casualties. So they're going to sue for peace with the Germans. And the Bolshevik Revolution will start in 1917. And it's going to be led by Vladimir Lenin. And he is going to adopt communism inside the Soviet Union. While the Soviet Union is communist, they are going to have, they're going to get uninvolved in the war. They're going to be more isolated. They're going to start to industrialize and catch up with the rest of the world. Millions of people are going to die through starvation as they try to industrialize and worry about factory work versus feeding the people. And the Lenin is going to take over. After him, it's going to be Joseph Stalin, which we'll talk about a little bit in World War II. Battle-wise, you just need to know pretty much Verdun is the most dangerous battle or most devastating battle of World War I. Over 1 million people are going to die. Almost 550,000 Germans and about 500,000 or 600,000 German or French. But it's going to be a devastating war today. The ground is still affected quite a bit. But with World War One, we get all sorts of outcomes and global effects. So colonies start to get some independence for helping and joining in the war. India gets a little bit of leadway with the British. They still don't get freed. We're going to have the end of empires like the Russian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the German Empire, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire that the Habsburgs have ruled. We talked about the Ottomans about the first week of class, and they're just now leaving. The Austro-Hungarian Empire we've been talking about for a long time. They're finally leaving. And it's the most deadliest war in human history up to this point. So it's going to really change the outcome of history. Woodrow Wilson is going to create the League of Nations, or the United States is going to design the League of Nations. And it's going to be a group where all the countries meet and decide to prevent global war. It's the war to end all wars, and it does not actually happen. The problem is, as you can see with this cartoon, the USA doesn't join. It's an election year for Woodrow Wilson, and Republicans are trying to take back the presidency. They have the Congress, and who does treaties is Congress, so they refuse to sign his bill, and Woodrow Wilson will lose his presidential election. So it was nothing more than mere politics. But since the United States, which was the most powerful member of World War I, doesn't get involved, it really changes the atmosphere for World War II. And the French and the British are a lot more punitive to Germany. They make Germany take a guilty clause, meaning they were responsible for the war, even though it was Austria. And that's through the Treaty of Versailles. Wilson's going to have 14 points, or his plan to build back. People used to aggravate Wilson because the Bible only has 10 commandments, but Wilson had 14 points. I like how they're summarized here. Open diplomacy, so no secret alliances. Freedom of the seas, you can travel as you want without restricted or unrestricted submarine warfare. You should not have to worry about your ships being attacked. Removal of economic barriers because trade equals peace. Reduction of arms and military. Let's get rid of some colonies. Let's get rid of some conquered territory in Russia. Belgium needs to be protected from Germany, which is going to be a problem in World War II. Restoration of French territory. Let's redraw Italy a bit and give them a little land. Division of Austria and Hungary. Redrawing of the Balkan boundaries. Let's limit Turkey or the Ottoman Empire. Let's create an independent Poland and an association of nations is Wilson's points. All of which very smart and very successful, except for the League of Nations, which does not work. The Treaty of Versailles makes Germany take full responsibility for the war. It limits the German military. And you can look and see what happens to Germany. If you look at hyperinflation, this is what people used to get paid in wheelbarrows. They started printing money to try to pay for World War I, all the reparations. It was like $40-some billion, around 44. Money becomes worthless when you overprint it. And you can see people just absolutely, they're letting their kids play with it. They use it as wallpaper. There's a story of a girl that stopped at a window to look at a dress, and she has a wheelbarrow full of money, but by the time she turns around, someone's dumped out her wheelbarrow of money and took the wheelbarrow because it was worth more money than the actual wheelbarrow itself. So that's another example there. So with World War I, there's a lot of problems, and Germany's going to have to take that blame, and it's going to be a problem for World War II because they're going to take that blame, and there's going to be a lot of issues. The League of Nations is not successful in preventing future wars, as you know, of World War II. United States not joining is the big issue, and there's no power to enforce decisions. We also have the mandate system that splits up the Ottoman Empire. So the Ottoman Empire, instead of it being just Muslims all living in this area, which they still will, and it's one Muslim empire, we have Turkey of modern country, we have Iran, we have the French Mandate of Syria, we have Lebanon, which is also independent, we have British Palestine and Israel, we have Iraq, which is British, we have Kuwait. All of these new countries come into play, and the French and British split these countries up among themselves. The United States doesn't get involved because we're not imperialistic. You know, we were built on the ideas of imperialism, so it's not what we're based on. So we don't get involved. But the big thing they're striving for is resources, and that resource after World War I is what do we need for our planes, our trucks, our tanks to run, and that's oil. And the French and British split these up to be about equal amounts of territory, but the problem is they put groups together that don't get along, like Sunni or Shia Muslims or Turks and Arabs. So there's all sorts of different groups that don't get along, and they're all placed together. Before, the Ottomans had all these groups under one barrier, but it was very loosely ran. It was such a big empire, but now they're more closely ran and more bureaucratic, and these groups have to answer to each other. That's going to create a lot of problems over this area. And that's what our future problems for the Middle East is. For example, Palestine and Israel. The question is maybe who has it or who doesn't have it. So we'll get back started with Unit 11 and talk about the interwar period and a little bit of Unit 12 when we get back.